So my name's Alex. I've been heading up OpenFAS, put this together originally in January, and I've just come back from Dockercon, so I want to tell you a little bit about that. So let's go over to Stefan. Just a really quick intro. We'll move around.
Hey, FAS community. I'm Stefan Prodan. I work for We, and lately I've been playing with OpenFAS, doing some Google Cloud integration with Dockercon, and today I've opened my first pull request regarding implementing basic authentication from the CLI to the server. So, and I'm looking forward to more.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Stefan. And thanks for opening your first PR. Very excited about that. Elliot?
Hi, so yeah, I'm a student at the University of Minnesota, and I've been making some contributions to FOSS-NetEase and documentation and various things.
Thank you. Got Eric.
Hey guys, I'm Eric. Got some stuff I'm working on with regards to reporting status of replicas in Docker Swarm, and I'm trying to set up Kubernetes to try it out there as well. So I might be asking some of you guys for Kubernetes help pretty soon.
And anyone good with Kubernetes, put your hand up. Stefan?
Yeah, I might be hitting up Elliot there.
Speak to Stefan as well. He's not put his hand up, but he's a Kubernetes mastermind. Thanks for that. Okay, Jolly.
Hello. I've been playing with FAS for a while now. I've hacked some nice solution around that to ping my blog or fast TensorFlow image to image recognition and some stuff like that. It has been a while since my latest contribution to this. I was thinking about what to do next practically. So open for ideas if you guys have some. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's have a look at the presentation in a few minutes and see if there's anything that pops out to you. Alex Young?
Yeah, my name's Alex. I'm based in Nottingham in the UK, work for a company called Unidays. I started getting involved with OpenFAS to kind of learn a bit of Go and also to kind of be able to use it at work so we can use different technologies rather than just relying on .NET.
Cool, that's good. So I think we've got somebody new, Nenad. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, that's me. So yeah, to introduce myself, I'm currently located in Berlin, originally from Serbia, working at Telefonica Germany, working on a project in IoT and kind of looking around to find some serverless stuff, and then I stumbled upon OpenFAS, which seemed pretty interesting. So I gave it a try, and I did like 2 pull requests so far. But yeah,
cool. Thank you. Well, you're most welcome, and hope to see you see those PRs through for you. Austin.
Yeah, my name's Austin Fry. I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I've just been involved with OpenFAS for a while now, I guess, just kind of helping out where I can. So it's good to see everybody today.
Thanks, man. And you're going to be taking some notes today, right?
That's the plan.
Yeah.
As long as my table doesn't fall over again.
Cool. And John Cade, I think it's maybe the first time we've seen you on one of the calls.
Yeah. So I attended a meeting about a month ago, and I was out of the country in Cuba, and then sort of doing some other travels around the States for work. But So I'm from Austin, Texas, and my primary experience is full stack development. So looking forward to finding some ways to contribute. Some areas that I've sort of identified with some of the front end UI.
Yep.
It's written in Angular, and looking at a possibility of submitting a PR to migrate it to Vue, to make it a little more feature proof.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Okay.
Be here.
Well, that's great. It's great to have you here. Thanks for making your first kind of call. It's good to see you in person. I think the front end definitely has a lot of opportunity, and there's probably a few things we can do before kind of completely revamping it to Vue. And I'd love to get your help and your take on that. But yeah, I could see us revamping it at some point. So it's good to have you here.
Thanks.
And I've got Burton.
Hi there. Sorry for the webcam troubles with them living in Austin, Texas. Trying to get into the OpenFast community. Thanks for opening some issues in the Hacktoberfest to get me into it. Got my first official Go pull request up for a merge, and been looking through the issues for other sort of beginner tasks because I'm really sort of green on the Golang. But if John wants help with the UI, that's my specialty sort of.
You're from Austin?
Yes.
Oh, cool. So am I. So we'll have to have OpenFast coffee meetup or something.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, you guys.
Excited to be part of the project.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and you guys should totally do that and take it to your local meetup. And then Min, it's Caro. What should we call you?
You can call me Quinn.
Quinn. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for finding time to come to the call. It's great to see you, and appreciate all the help that you've given us around the CLI. It's really made a difference. Do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, I'm in Paris, and now I'm working for a Boston company, and I'm not working with Go much, so a lot with PHP, and OpenFast is something. Function as a service is something I'm interested in for now, so I'm looking much in this technology.
Yes, yeah, great, thank you. And I know that you've done a lot of work with John McCabe. So, John, do you want to go now?
Yep. Hi, I'm John McCabe. I'm based in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I work my day job. I work for Publish on like a cloud and future tech team. And I've been sort of helping out in bits and places with OpenFaz and sort of acting as a cheerleader at a couple of conferences.
Yeah, I think we all know you've done far more than that. So John is just I don't know where you find the time. Just the amount of stuff you've done recently is mind blowing. John's worked on documentation site for us. He's done analytics. He's got his bitbar menu. Who's seen the bitbar menu? Yeah, if you haven't, John, you should send a link into the Slack after the call and just let everyone see that because it's very, very cool. And then Richard.
Hello, everybody. Richard G. I'm in the UK, in the Midlands, with the UK government. I seem to have been involved quite a while now with FAS, OpenFaz, occasional PR, and helping out here and there.
Great. Yeah, and thank you for helping us curate the issues and apply labels. So I think there's a few people that have said to me they were looking at the issues and they weren't sure, if it was going to be an easy one to work on or not. And we've got some labels. Now there's about 5 or 6 people in the group who can assign labels. So, if you're not sure what skill level is, just ping someone and we'll try and get some more beginner ones out there too. Okay. So let me just share my screen, and some people might need to go on mute. We'll kind of start with a really quick presentation. I need to get these minimized as well. Right. So welcome to the fourth contributors meeting. As I said before, we've had a few with a smaller group leading up to this, but I think these are really great, and I've had a lot of feedback. People really find these useful and a good way of getting to know who's working on the project. So I'm going to start with some updates from Dockercon. So Stefan, John, and myself were at Dockercon in Copenhagen, and Docker announced that they're now going to start shipping Kubernetes as part of their Enterprise Edition product. Some way down the line, we may even see it in their Community Edition product. And one thing that's really going to be really cool for us is getting Kubernetes in Docker for Mac and Docker for Windows. So some people have already made that transition from Docker Swarm to Kubernetes to help us out with our direction, help us out with our goals of documenting and helping everyone get on board. Maybe you installed Minikube, maybe you had to set up a VM. Well, this is good news for us. It's going to make things a lot easier. Some of the other big announcements were around Docker's focus on taking a traditional application and just putting it in a container and trying to do it without making any changes. So I think that's something that, that you'll see more and more. But what I hope is that Docker will find it easier to help and promote the content that we're writing that covers both platforms. If you need somewhere to start with it, or you want to get a quick overview of Dockercon, I've written up a blog post, and it goes through a lot of that in detail. On Monday, I had the chance to present to a group of industry analysts called Tech Field Day. Now, there were some people here who are quite well known in the field for their networking knowledge and storage knowledge. So that they would normally get presentations from Cisco, NetApp, AppDynamics, those kinds of firms. And they gave me a 20-minute slot to demo OpenFaaS. And this is a picture of it setting up in Kubernetes, which was great because we just had an announcement from Docker under embargo that they were getting the Kubernetes support. So it's perfect timing. One of the things that I really was proud to do was present the community to them and tell them that's the real kind of the reason this project's succeeding is because of the values and putting people first, making sure that we do what we can to help you. And I know some of you are contributing to this project because at work maybe you are just working with PHP, or you're not really getting the chance to flex your creativity. So really appreciate your contributions. And we had Team Serverless. So this is John McCabe with his back to us and his colleague Scotty Colton. And the first lot of t-shirts came out. And you can see I've got one on at the moment too. This is another shot of Team FAS. So we had Finian and his friend Ollie here. And we were up late on I believe the Monday night, helping them out with their presentation, doing some mentoring and just getting them, giving them some advice. So they were using OpenFaaS to apply machine learning and colorize a video that was black and white. So it's very, very cool stuff, and they'll have a recording up soon. Now, this was my talk in the community theatre. I don't know if Stefan was there, but there were quite a few people here, as you can see. Standing room only, and I asked at the beginning who's used Docker. Pretty much every hand went up. Who's used Kubernetes? About half. When we came to serverless, it was about 20 or 30 people. So, my message was, you're in the right place. I'm going to show you how to get from 0 to serverless in 60 seconds. And some of the feedback I had from one of the people in the session with Tech Field Day, and also one of the sort of high up technical people at VMware, is they tried other projects like OpenWhisk. And they just didn't know what they were doing. They found it really hard. And then when they went to OpenFaaS, they actually found it really easy, and they knew exactly where they were. And so I think stressing that this is something that is for developers and that's easy to use, quick to get started with, is very important. Now, there was also a serverless panel that took place on Thursday. And here we've got, on the right-hand side, Patrick Chanzon from Docker, Phil Estes, who's working on OpenWhisk, Chad Almira from Iron Functions, Erica from IOPipe, and then there I am at the end. And so we were talking about our various projects and backgrounds, what we think about serverless, and there'll be a talk out that you can watch too. Now, I didn't know it until the end, but Steve Singh, Docker's CEO, had actually crept in at the back, and he was taking notes. So I think that goes to show how much of a stir there is around serverless right now. And he also mentioned serverless and IoT at the edge in his opening keynote on the Tuesday. So eyes are on us. Know that every contribution that you're making really counts, and had a lot of validation from analysts and other people that are working in this space, well renowned. And one of the main things, as I've said before, is they see the community, which is all of you guys, and they're just so impressed by the vibrancy, by how creative we are, and how working together, pulling one direction, we're able to do what we can. This was a very cool part of Dockercon. This was the Moby Summit on the last day. And here we have Abby, who works at Docker, presenting OpenFAS with internal Docker projects. So here he had the concept of using something called Linux Kit, which will create a virtual machine that runs containers. He had a cart where he'd specify what containers he wanted, like Redis and Nginx. And then he would call a function called build. And when he built that, then basically he would get a Linux Kit virtual machine. It took about 30 seconds. So it was really cool that other people, especially inside Docker, were using OpenFAS for their demos. We also got a mention from the Containerd team. This is the Docker Captains group. You see Solomon at the front. There I am next to Laura Frank, Dimitris behind. It was kind of cool running into Dimitris for the first time because he's got an application called Kubernetic, which is a brilliant dashboard for Kubernetes. And I've got a link in my blog. So if you're starting out with Kubernetes and you're not really sure where to go, do check that out. And so I wanted to go onto the theme for this meeting, which is to deliver. So the previous meeting that we had was about focus, because we were doing so many things, so many cool things. And it was a case of us kind of doubling down on strategy and actually being able to get going in the same direction. Well, now I'm saying we've got users, we've got so many eyes on us. People are kind of hyping up what we're doing. And it's time for us to kind of really focus on pull requests, focus on issues, newcomers into the community, make them feel at home, just like we did when you arrived. And look at the issues and pull requests. Is someone a first-time contributor like Stefan? Can we help get their work through? And don't be afraid to comment. Okay, so one of the things Solomon said in one of the briefings was, early in the days of Docker, one of the hardest things I had to do was to say no to things, but it actually really helped them deliver what they said they would. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Now, I'm really excited about this because OpenFAS, if you look on the right-hand side under serverless event-based computing, is actually listed on the cloud-native landscape. This is something that I've been pushing for about 6 to 8 weeks, and this is just great to be on here. This is really, really going to help us, and it's showing that we are one of the projects that you really need to start looking at in this area. When I announced it at the Moby Summit, we got a big clap, so well done. So we actually have, I've checked the stats again with a function that Ken wrote, 47 contributors now across the organization, 1,080 commits, and way more forks. So this is a quite up-to-date picture. If you're not on here, send me your avatar afterwards, because in the next talk, I just want to show everyone that's making an impact here. You might ask, why have I put this slide in this deck? The key reason is because I've heard people come up to me and say, well, look, I didn't know what serverless was, but then when I heard your talk, it made sense to me. And I've also seen people quote me on Twitter saying serverless is an architectural approach, which is really the messaging that we want to have out there for open source serverless. So even if sometimes it may feel like you've seen this slide, you've had this idea, every talk that's been given, it really helps newcomers. And from what I saw when I gave my talk in front of that large crowd, there were a lot of newcomers and there are a lot of people who don't really know what we're talking about. So basics really matter. This is just a quick kind of overview. This is something that Finian did, and his bot is actually down at the moment. But if you wait until late on Monday, Tuesday, you can tweet a black and white picture to Colorize bot, and it will actually turn it to color using just an off-the-shelf machine learning Docker image that we packaged. And it's really cool. There's some more examples in the blog. Another question that I got over and over is, does OpenFAS run a container for every request? And so what I wanted to start to do was try to make it clearer what was happening. So most of you already know this, but when we get a request to the container, the watchdog sits inside it. It's like a sidecar. That comes in via HTTP on port 8080. We'll then fork the process, which starts it inside the container. We feed the values in through standard in. Any headers that come go through environment. We run the process, and when it exits, we read the standard out values and we put them back out the other end. Anyone have any questions about this? Okay, so we don't create a container per request. We actually create a process per request. Now that's your basic vanilla use case that you're used to already. We have something else called afterburn, and this works slightly different. And the reason we have this is some languages like Java have a very they have a significant startup time, maybe 180 milliseconds. So at number one, when we start the container, we fork the process immediately. And so this might be node app.js. It will then keep running for the duration of the container. And you see that number 2 and 3 have changed a bit now. So when the request comes in, we already have the process and we just talk to it and it calls the handler function. And then the response is read back out again. So this is something that if you want to have a play with it, can give extremely high throughput and performance. But it's also, I'd say probably alpha or beta quality. So it's not fully released. And I'd really like some volunteers to go and have a play with this. Any questions? Okay. So what's next? Well, as I said, with this theme, we need to keep delivering. One of the things users have said is, while we enjoy the documentation, the blogs are thorough, we want a documentation site. And I think when we get more and more businesses looking at the project, that's just what they expect. So John McCabe's done some work with a tool called MKDocs, which turns Markdown into a website. I think we need to launch that within a couple of weeks. It doesn't necessarily mean John has to do that, but it might be something that I look at. Definitely would like help with it. Performance testing.
I'd expect to get the initial PR up middle of next week, and then kind of we can continue working on it from there before pulling the trigger.
Sounds good to me. The other thing is, some people have played around with what they'd consider load testing, and they may run into an issue or they may have unexpected behavior. Now, load testing, performance testing is something that has to be done professionally. For instance, you can't just take a Docker machine, virtual machine with 1 gig of RAM, start pummeling it with hundreds of thousands of connections and expect it to be okay. There are techniques, and this is an art in itself. But I set up a tool called Siege, which is, again, it's kind of a dumb tool. It does a denial of service attack. And I found there to be pretty decent stability. And across 4 bare metal machines with Packet, I was able to see that every set of 5 replicas we added resulted in quite a dramatic increase in throughput. So if anyone's played with these kinds of tools and wants to set something up on the cloud, I'd really appreciate your help with that. It will definitely help us. Stefan has been... Okay, go ahead.
So I've been setting up on a Google Cloud the Swarm cluster, 3 managers, 3 workers. And I've used Hey. Hey is a load testing tool written in Go that's very cool. And I've tested it with 10,000 requests, with 100 requests in parallel. And at my first load test, the first 1,000 requests are failing every time. So I hope I'll have time to get in there and debug that.
That's something that I haven't seen before. I mean, I'm just trying to get back to see you. Sorry. That's something that I haven't seen before. Actually, I saw the opposite. I saw 0 failed connections. So it might be something specific to the setup that you have. I was testing with Kubernetes. Also did some with Swarm. So yeah, let's dig into that together. Have a chat on Slack. See if anyone else wants to join in.
Yeah, okay. I will set up a test environment, try to reproduce it a couple of times, and I'll make a small document so everyone can reproduce it.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe have a look with the Siege tool as well, which is generally in the apt-get repositories. The basic authentication is on here because I think what you'll find very quickly is once people open their gateway on the internet, it is very open. Anyone can call any of the commands. I'm not worried about people calling your functions because you can do stuff inside your functions, but you don't necessarily want someone being able to deploy their own functions on your gateway, and you don't necessarily want them to be deleting your functions either. So
I'm worried about everything.
Right.
I don't want anyone be able to access any of my functions. For example, one of my functions that I'm working on is scaling out the Swarm workers. So I don't want anyone to be able to just create a huge amount of depth on my account.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that instance, what you probably do is look at something like what GitHub does, which is to use HMAC and a symmetric key so that the function itself can validate a request. That may be one option. Another option might be that, you just put security in front of the whole damn thing. But I think a lot of the functions that we've written here are things like GitHub integrations, Twitter integrations, where you're fully expecting a unauthenticated HTTPS connection to come from a cloud and call straight to one of your functions. So we'll look at a couple of patterns. Maybe we need to document this. It's pretty easy to put basic authentication and TLS in front of the gateway using Kong, Caddy, or Nginx. But the CLI right now doesn't support the notion of authentication. So if you enable it, you then have to fall back to deploying via curl, just so that everyone's aware. So we've got some ongoing discussion around that.
Yeah, so there is a pull request that implements authentication the same way as Docker login does, without the use of, I don't know, advanced features like, okay, let's store this in my chain on macOS or something like that, but it does the same as Docker did like from the beginning till a couple of months ago.
Yeah. So let's talk about the design of that a bit more on the PR. I know that I sat down with the Docker security team, and they were really less than impressed with the way that had been done before with their tooling. I think the idea was you did Docker login, and then you base 64 encoded the string and just stored it on the file system. It might be okay if you have the correct permission set on the file. It's certainly not as bad as some of the other options, but I think eventually it would make sense to have it in the keychain. I'd just like to understand how much more effort or vendoring is involved for that.
So just to mention on this, the pull request I did, the recent one, was actually doing this. So it stores the login. Actually, it fetches the login from the keychain based on the registry. It uses the same methods. Basically, it takes the package from the Docker CLI that is using this and implements it. So we can go and look at that pull request at some point.
You made that pull request to OpenFAS?
Yes, to the CLI. It's a part.
Okay.
I will reference it afterwards. So.
Okay.
Or post it in Slack or in chat.
My suggestion is that you and Stefan work together. If you guys could do that, and review what each other's done, talk about the pros and cons, put some notes on the issue, and once we're happy with the proposed design, we'll go ahead and we'll implement it and test it. So yeah, okay. Thanks for your input on that. I also spoke about Afterburn. So one of the things I want to do is to harden that and actually get it released. We need your help for that. So that means having a look at the instructions, figuring out how to test it, building a function, maybe leaving it running, maybe running Hey or running Siege against it, seeing what happens if you create an error from your code, seeing what happens if your process creates an error as soon as it loads, and have we done enough for that? So at the moment, there's the Afterburn technique, which is never really going to be the default. Requires a library in Python, has a library in Python, Node.js, or Java. I think they're the three options. Just chat to me on Slack, and I'll point you in the right direction if you want to help. John is also delivering on the analytics and statistics from the CLI. So if you want to have a look at his proposal, I believe that's on the CLI repo at the moment. And the idea is that as people use it, whatever country they're in, how many files they have in their stack, are they using environment variables or not, are they using TLS or not, all of that kind of data will be collated anonymously. And then it will help us to make decisions about how people, what people want from what we're doing. And then the last thing is a couple of people have helped us out with a Kafka, either a Kafka connector or a Kafka queue processor. I looked at the pull request, and it actually seemed to vendor about 15 more projects and add a lot of code, like 150 files. So we need to really have a look at that and decide, should that become part of the code that we have in the repo, or should that be somehow isolated? So that's open. And again, if you're particularly good with Kafka or you listen to this recording afterwards, people like David McKay, really appreciate your input.
So it's a replacement for nuts or what?
Yeah, an option, a second option.
So is the functionality the same as the asynchronous functions?
Yeah, the different transport mechanism. So this is for people who already have Kafka running in their systems and they want to leverage it. For instance, King Huang from the University of Calgary, they use Kafka, and they actually do something even smarter. They've created their own Kafka connector for OpenFAS functions. So they apply labels to their functions, and then they use a tiny piece of code that uses Kafka events to call into OpenFAS functions through the gateway. That's something else that we should do, because I think this is a very common use case, and several people have kind of said that to me. So there's a number of things that I think are not like within the maybe the near or mid distance, but they're maybe a little bit further away. And one of those things might be to have a service which can build a function, i.e. a Docker container, that can run in your Docker swarm. There was something we were shown at Dockercon in the Moby Summit called BuildKit. I had a quick play with it. What you can do is deploy a container, and then you can build an entire Docker image with it. You can also build other things. And so I think this could be really interesting for the kind of work Jock's been doing with his time to code editor. Particularly interesting if you don't want to have the Docker CLI on your build machine. You don't want to have the Docker daemon on it. Using BuildKit could allow us to do Docker builds as a service and have that as an option for people who want to put a tight loop around their entire OpenFAS. So they may have the gateway, they may have this build service and a registry, and the three work together to create a really nice tight boundary. Okay, multi-tenancy. So I think there've been a number of people in the community who have asked me about this. I was talking to Illy from Weaveworks and a couple of the guys from a security startup, Control Plane, and we were thinking, well, how could you do multi-tenancy and have it at a way where things have a degree of isolation? And one option might be to look into networking driver, something like Weaveworks, WeaveNet, and find a way of separating the namespaces. This may not be suitable for confidential critical data. When you get to that level, you probably do want VM isolation or something stronger. But certainly for a shared pool of resources where you have multiple people making use of it, this could be an option. Okay. An AWS connector. So there have been so many people that have said the beauty of Lambda is that it's so connected to everything else Amazon offers. Now, there's an issue out for this as a proposal, which is to integrate with, I believe it was the SQSQ, which is where you can have all of your events that are generated from an AWS environment put through a queue, which is PubSub. Now, if we had a connector for that, we could have those events forwarded onto the gateway. Maybe there's a bit of magic sauce there that says what function they should go to, or there could be a function that gets everything. This, I think, could be a really, this could really help us lead in this space. And it's definitely worth having a look at. So if you're using AWS already and you kind of know about this stuff, again, appreciate your input.
Would it be SQS or SNS?
Yeah, so there's two things. One is PubSub and one is a queue that you have to poll. I imagine it would be the PubSub version. So it sounds like you might have some ideas around that. So check out the issue, and if you can comment, please do. Scaling to zero replicas, again, is something that I think at a technical level will get us merit and kudos in the community. But in terms of the people that are actually using this, scaling to zero doesn't necessarily make sense for them. They may have very little to gain from it. Scaling to zero can be done very easily by looking at metrics, running a process in the background that says, well, it's not being called, so let's scale it down through the API. But scaling back up again on demand is kind of a bit harder. I wrote 20 lines of code in the Moby Summit, and I was able to get Docker Swarm to rescale the service back up again and wait until it was ready, and then let a request through to it. So I think that could be something fun to look at. Certainly, maybe if someone's thinking of doing a conference talk or something like that, this could be something we can kind of dig into. And then the last thing, John McCabe has his Bitbar integration. But again, I think in terms of focusing and delivering, we probably need to kind of do some of the boring stuff, some of the things that people just expect, like the documentation. But this is definitely something that's coming. Okay. So thank you very much, guys. Were there any questions on any of the bits I touched on there?
So scaling back up after you're at 0, what's the latency look like for that? Like, is it going to take a while between when you send your request and when the container is actually ready?
Yes, it is. On Docker Swarm, I guess it was about a second. But the thing is, if you are convinced that you need this, you should have an opportunity, and we do it, then you should have an opportunity to opt into it. And if you look at something like Lambda, I think that you have like up to 5 seconds or more to wait, depending on whether they have something ready for you or not. Anything else from anyone else on these points?
A quick question talking about the releases and stuff. I think I noticed it's the official release tag is like 0.16, I think. What's your goal for getting to 1.0 or what?
So 1.0.
The roadmap and the
yeah 1.0
the roadmap in the repos is
1.0 is generally when a project isn't going to make breaking changes anymore, and if they do, that becomes a 2.0. I think at the moment, despite not having a 1.0 release, doesn't mean that you can't use this in production and you can't develop a system around it. It just means that we may change some things. And this is the same thing that Docker is saying about Linux Kit and Containerd. Linux Kit in particular, I know, has been involved in a lot of POCs and interesting projects in industry. So it's not necessarily going to put people off. But yeah, maybe we can work on a story of what we need to get to a 1.0 and stop making breaking changes. Some of the things that we need to do is, as I said, kind of deliver on that end-to-end experience of being able to pull from private repos, being able to have security upfront, fast CLI login, etc. We've just had a guide put together by Ken, which helps you set up CI/CD. And so I think there's that kind of stuff doesn't affect whether you're 1.0, but we are still making a lot of changes every week. And yeah, it might be worth us revisiting the roadmap.
Okay, Alex, can you please repeat what you had in mind with BuildKit to build?
Yeah, so the idea with BuildKit is what you could do is not have Docker on the machine where you're running the CLI. So for instance, you do fast CLI build and the build actually takes place on a remote computer. Now that might be useful for a number of reasons, particularly in a lockdown environment, but it's also useful for when people want to build something on top of OpenFaaS as a framework. So if you think about, I don't know who's seen Lambda, but up to a certain point, you can just type code in a browser and hit build, and it builds an image, push it to your registry, and will run it for you. So that, that's the kind of use case that you might have around that.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So does anyone want to contribute, but they don't really know where to get started?
So yeah, Alex, maybe I'll follow up with you offline later and talk about some of the front work ideas that you have in mind, and then I can get together with. Forgive me, I already forgot. Is it Burton?
Yeah, Burton.
Yeah, maybe I can link up with Burton and we can come up with some projects to collaborate on.
Yeah, that would be great.
Does that sound good to you?
Definitely sounds good. There is we don't have a lot of time to go through pull requests, but there's one here from King Huang at University of Calgary. One of the things he wanted to do was to add labels to functions. I think that's just a pretty normal use case for something that uses a function, uses a service or a container. His changes are quite kind of in depth, and they do touch a lot of areas, but what I've started to do is kind of my own version of this, which would allow you to pass a label from the CLI all the way down through to the back end. And then you can make more decisions about what happens to your functions at runtime. And then we may be able to look at the changes that King wanted in this. There's something that is kind of bugging me, which is that we haven't finished the work that was started by Eric. Now, what Eric was doing was giving us a way of adding a custom community template for a function into the CLI. So let's say Quinn has his PHP template. It works for his business perfectly. Maybe it doesn't work for everyone's business use case. And maybe we don't feel like PHP is something we want to have in the CLI officially. Well, the idea behind this pull request was that you could say, okay, add a template and put a GitHub URL. It would download the template to your local directory, and you could start using it, building your functions and pushing them up to the gateway. We actually got the basic functionality working, and we moved on, and we kind of got a bit further down, and we started to think about, is add template the right wording, the right syntax? And I just wanted to see if John and Richard, it's Caro and Eric, if you're there, like if you could kind of say where we are with this and what the latest is, what do we need to do to finish this?
Yeah, I just got to make those changes. We got a proposal for what to change the name of the command to. So I'm just going to make that before the end of the day, and then it should be good to go. I think there's some merge conflicts too, but you know.
Okay.
So
what would we be using instead of FastCLI add template? What's the kind of thing we'd do?
I think it's like FastCLI template new, something like that. I'll have to check.
John, are you still there?
Yeah. I think my suggestion was just really to sort of get the guys to sort of think about it a little bit more. I didn't have a particularly strong, view on which the best option was, just that it needed to be something slightly less generic. So template new sounds reasonable enough to me. It was just really to get people to start thinking about the fact that, the CLI, we don't want to be changing it very frequently if we can at all avoid it. So.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, it's actually template pull. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point, especially because like all the other ones are FastCLI verb, whereas this is kind of like template isn't a verb, I don't think. So, yeah, I mean, I guess there's no like best thing to do here, but I think it's a good point for sure.
So it might be interesting to see what Stefan thinks. And also, I think, yeah, I put template pull there because template new sounded a bit like you were actually creating it there and then.
Right.
Whereas pull is like, well, we have this remote repo, we're now going to pull it in. And then I think John's point was, rather than just pulling it in and shoving it in a directory, we should maybe actually go a bit further and write it to a config file. Or YAML, let's say. And then every time you do FastCLI build or new and the templates aren't there, it will pull everything that you have in your config file. What that would also allow you to do is opt out of the official ones if you've completely customized all of them.
Also, you'll need I don't know, Git revision there because, okay, I'm pulling that template, but tomorrow the template will be changed. So I think like in every dependency management system, we have to rely on something, and revision, I think, the most obvious one.
Yeah, and actually, you
So
know,
in the config file,
people should be able to perhaps put
yes,
the revision or master. So let's say that they live on the edge and they build Docker latest for everything. That should be okay for them if they're okay with the consequences. So they have the two options. They can pin to a specific version, or they can use the master.
Yeah. I think I've normally seen that as like a -- branch and a -- revision, where the revision can be both a label or a SHA.
Yep.
So, for example, while we've got this open, then we look at what we've got now. We might have something like templates, node, repo. This is where it kind of gets a bit harder, because we were thinking of storing multiple templates within a repo. Let's take this commit. This may actually have to go the other way around, or so if you had that commit ID. So we could always specify them in a user readable way and then fetch them in a smart way. So let's say you had, here's my templates, here's Node.js, here's the repo. We know it's version language node repo version. For instance, what do people think about seeing that kind of thing in a file?
Would that last one be revision or a SHA ID or something?
Yes, sorry, revision.
Do you want this in this pull request?
It's a good question.
I wouldn't. I would try and do as little as humanly possible to get your current one merged, because otherwise it'll never die. It'll be like a zombie. So,
okay,
that sounds good. That sounds good to me.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. And then I put a note, please open a follow-up PR to do the following. And then maybe when we get to that point, we can start to think about the revisions. There's nothing necessarily to stop you having something like this in the file, whatever kind of level you had it at already.
So is language version arbitrary there?
I'm not entirely sure. I know we only have kind of a couple of minutes, but I thought let's figure this out on the next PR. But this is
Sounds
the kind of thing I think that Stefan's saying. He's right. I've thought about this many times, is that you just end up with whatever's in master. But we should have a way of pinning, because when people get to running this in production, then they need to have a way of having a repeatable build, so they get exactly the same output every time.
So I've started a package in my PR that it's a config package, and all of this I think should go into that package, because you want a single piece of code to manage the config stuff. It wasn't there, and I had to create it. So you have everything like load, save, update, and stuff like that. Okay. So I think if we extend the config YAML, we should use that package.
There's already a lot of functionality around that in the Bitbar app for dealing with the config file that's there. In the way I've got like a .openfaz directory, and I have a config.yaml in there. There's already handling in there for like doing stuff like ensuring the directories exist, creating them if they don't. Mm-hmm. Ensuring that you can figure out what the home directory is, because you're not always going to be able to assume what that is, and so on. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that's already implemented there that's worth looking at.
Yeah, I think I've covered everything you've put there and more.
Yeah.
So
I had been intending to put that into the CLI at some point, but yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of things like needs must, and we definitely have to focus. So, John, I'd suggest before we merge Stefan's changes that you do a review and make any suggestions that you need to. Stefan, I'd say make sure that we have unit test coverage, because what I've seen playing this forward is with Minio, they're currently at something like version 12 of their schema. So every time they make a breaking change, they have to run a pre-init command that migrates the schema, and they have unit tests that cover all the way back to version 0. And once we introduce this, we'll need to do something very similar too.
Yeah, right now I've written some tests like save, update, validate everything, but it's not related to the schema. We should do that at some point, yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I'm really looking forward to see that. And I think, did I see a sneaky one in here too about multi-tenancy? Somewhere from you?
That's in the CLI repo, yeah.
The CLI repo. It's an interesting place to put it. How come this has the name multi-tenancy then?
Because the CLI would support multi-gateway location, right?
Okay, I get it. Do you think you can change the name to something more specific to that, like basic or support multiple gateways?
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're kind of just running over, but does anyone have any feedback about the CLI experience here for the login command? The login command would take your password in some way and store it in your home directory.
Is that your Docker password?
This is your FAS CLI, FAS gateway password.
So is there a way to create a new user and password?
No, not necessarily. So on the server, what you might do is introduce Kong, Caddy, Apache, or Nginx with your user hard-coded or pre-configured. And then this is really just to connect to it.
Okay, the thing that I've been mentioning, now I see it's not really related, is that the pull request I did earlier, it is for the registry authentication. And the thing that I mentioned was that I was using the Docker login method, not the base64 encoding of a username and password, but now they changed this to use the keychain based on the operating system you are. For Windows is something else, and so on and so on. And there is a nice package on how they store the credentials and all this kind of stuff. And this is the thing that they use for to basically, you can do the Docker login, and basically it stores your credentials. And then once you talk with the gateway, you then base64 this and send it, so then can access the registry. Maybe we can merge this together, so can you use the same methods.
Okay, yeah, you guys definitely need to talk then. If you can reach out to each other on Slack, I think you're in the same time zone.
Sure.
One of the other things is right now, the experience for getting a container from a Kubernetes repository and a Docker Swarm repository is different. So for the Kubernetes repository, you pass a secret, and that is your image pool secret, but only the name. And you should pre-configure the image pool secret in your Kubernetes daemon cluster. In Docker Swarm, we have something like registry auth token that is passed separately. And that was done up front by Lee Capelli because he was testing it at AT&T, and they needed a quick way of pulling private images. So again, I think that might need another review, and whatever we do, it should, as much as possible, work in the same way for both.
I see. Okay. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, with these changes that we've got here, they're not, straightforward, and they are going to take some design discussion, and there's going to be some iteration. So, it might take a bit longer to get these merged. I just want to make you aware of that. If you do want something in so that you can say you've got something in, then we can definitely go and create something that's easy that we can just merge straight away. But I think some of these things are just going to take a bit longer to work themselves through. Okay. Cool.
Okay, it's okay.
Does anyone have anything else before we just drop off?
Alex, you got a second to talk maybe after the thing about Docker Swarm API usage for filtering for replicas?
Yeah. I mean, we can stay on the call and talk about that if you like.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah. Okay, and Austin, you've got the notes, so take it.
Yep, the notes are in the main doc.
Okay. If anyone doesn't have access to the notes, it's in the meeting invite, but it's actually, I think it's one of these ones where everyone can edit, but only the people that are invited. So if you're not invited to edit, ping me directly on Slack, and then that will help me give you access. And it just looks like this. It's got each meeting that we've had. It will have the URL for the recording. It's got the attendees, just the kind of stuff you'd expect. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. You should be proud. It's been an incredible week for OpenFAS, and I think this is just, this is a tip of the iceberg. So really looking forward to seeing you on Slack this week. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Hey, Alex. So yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time with this stuff, but I just wanted to go over this real quick.
Yeah.
So
do you want to share something as well?
Do you think? Yeah. If we can bring up the pull request for that